She thought it was just another broken-down cop car. A rusted-out cruiser sold at auction, missing lights, flaking paint, and a trunk that wouldn't open. But once she got it back to the shop, what she found locked inside the evidence compartment would unravel a decades-old mystery and tie her life to a case that was never meant to be solved. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode might just change everything you think you know about justice and fate. The cruiser didn't look like much. Matte black paint curled off the frame like burnt paper. The spotlight mount was gone, just a rusted bolt hole left behind. No lights on top, no unit number, just a blank skeletal shell of what used to be something official. Ellie Granger stood with her arms crossed, watching the government surplus auctioneer wave his clipboard and shout numbers that echoed off the walls of the county impound lot. She hadn't come to bid, at least not seriously, but when the 1,997 Crown Victoria rolled up, flat, tired, and silent, something tugged at her gut. It was instinct, the kind you don't ignore when you've been under hoods and inside broken things your whole life. The auctioneer barely got a starting bid before he dropped the price to scrap value. 400. Anyone? 400 gets it out of here today. No hands went up. A few buyers chuckled. Come on, it's got history. Might still have ghosts in the trunk. That made them laugh louder. Ellie stepped forward. She didn't laugh. She raised her hand. Back at her small-town shop, the cruiser sat like a fossil outside Bay 2. Max, her 19-year-old apprentice, gave it a slow walk around. You sure about this one? He asked. Doesn't look like it's got a single part worth saving. Ellie shrugged. It's not about parts. Max arched an eyebrow. Then what is it? Ellie didn't answer. Not because she didn't know, but because she wasn't sure how to explain it yet. Some cars speak. Not in words, in tension, in secrets. This one didn't speak, it waited. She tried the trunk again. Still stuck. Not rusted shut. Locked. But the key she'd been given didn't fit. Max pulled on the back seat. Want to go through the cab? Ellie nodded. They shoved and yanked until the rear bench gave way, exposing the steel partition behind it. And there, tucked behind the cage wall, was something they hadn't expected. A flat black box, bolted to the interior with tamper-proof screws. It looked like an evidence locker, one that had never been opened. Why would this still be in here? Max asked, frowning. Should have been stripped before it ever left the lot. Ellie didn't answer, but her stomach turned. She reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a folded sheet, water-damaged and yellow, a decommissioning checklist. Everything marked off, except one line, remove compartment from rear partition. Left blank. Circled in red. She looked up at Max. We're not scrapping this, she said softly. We're waking it up. And deep in the silence of her garage, the past began to stir. Ellie rolled the cruiser into the bay and switched on the overhead lights. They flickered, humming like old neon signs. Dust danced in the air as Max grabbed a rag and a can of degreaser. The front fender was dented just above the wheel well, the chrome grille pitted and dulled. But Ellie didn't start with the outside. She started with the badge number, barely visible on the dash cluster. GCPD 93, Glenfield County Police Department. Her hometown force, the one her father used to serve on. Max pulled a peeling decal from the door with gloved fingers. You think this thing was involved in something? He asked. Ellie ran her hand over the hood, feeling the years of sun-scorched neglect in the paint. Everything's involved in something, she muttered. She popped the hood. The engine was seized, but intact. Nothing had been scavenged. That alone was strange. Most auction cruisers came stripped. This one still had its dash wiring, radio harness, even the push bar mount up front. It was like someone wanted to preserve it, or forget it. In the footwell on the passenger side, Max kicked something loose. A folder, wedged behind the kick panel. Ellie picked it up and flipped it open. Inside were carbon copy traffic citations from 1,996. Dozens of them. All unsigned, all issued from Unit 93. One had a name she recognized: Lillian Vance. She froze. That was the girl who vanished her junior year of high school. Her face had been on flyers. Her story, barely whispered anymore. Ellie hadn't heard that name in years. She pulled off her gloves, walked to the locker behind the rear cage, tried the lock again, still no luck. The bolts were Specialty Torque's police issue. Max leaned in. "We can drill them." Ellie hesitated. Not yet. She didn't know why, but something told her this wasn't about force. This was about patience, about letting the story come when it was ready. She took a step back and stared at the cruiser, now stripped of its decals, but somehow more haunting in its blankness, like a ghost waiting to speak. Later that night, when the shop was quiet and Max had gone home, Ellie pulled out her dad's old service notebook from the filing cabinet, a relic she hadn't touched in years. She flipped through it, past oil change logs and part numbers, until she saw it scrawled in pencil. Case 4421. She looked at the citation again. Same number. Her heart thumped. She whispered to the cruiser, like it could hear her. "What did they bury in you?" And the silence seemed to answer back. Morning light crept through the garage windows as Ellie circled the cruiser again, this time with purpose. Max showed up with coffee and a fresh drill bit set. "Still thinking about that box?" he asked. Ellie nodded, eyes never leaving the black steel rectangle bolted inside the rear cage wall. They disconnected the battery, removed the rear seats completely, and cleared space around the partition. Max lined up the drill. "On 3?" Ellie just nodded. The first bolt shrieked as the bit spun against steel. The second came easier. By the fourth, the locker gave a soft creak and shifted forward an inch. Ellie reached out, fingers trembling, and slowly opened the latch. The door clicked. Inside was a single clear evidence bag, brittle from age. It held 3 things: a rusted silver locket, an undeveloped film canister, and a manila tag with faded red ink. Case 4421. Do not destroy. Hold for internal review. Beneath that, evidence custodian, Sergeant Ray Granger. Ellie's stomach flipped. That was her father. She stepped back. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Max looked up. "Your dad logged this?" She nodded slowly, staring at the locket. It looked like something a child might wear. Delicate. Old. The clasp broken. Max picked up the film canister. "Think there's anything still on this?" Ellie didn't answer. Her hands were already reaching for the tag, tracing the handwriting. Her father had retired early, claimed burnout. But he never spoke of the past. Never mentioned this case. Never mentioned a cruiser that was never decommissioned properly. They laid the contents out on a clean rag. Ellie flipped open the locket. Inside was a faded photo barely visible. A little girl in a red coat, maybe 8, smiling awkwardly. The background was foggy, unidentifiable. But something about her face tugged at Ellie's memory. She pulled out her phone, typed, "Glenfield Missing Persons 1990s" into the search bar, and scrolled. Her breath caught. The photo on an archived article was clearer than the locket image, but it was her, Lillian Vance. Reported missing, 1996. Last seen near Hollow Lake. Case closed, presumed runaway. But Ellie remembered the whispers. Lillian's father had been a cop, the same department, the same time. Her mind raced. The cruiser, the case, the missing girl, and her father's name on the evidence log. The film canister felt heavier now. Not in weight. In consequence, Ellie turned to Max. "We need to get this developed." He nodded. "And if there's something on it?" She looked back at the cruiser, its stripped shell quietly watching them. "Then this car is a witness." And it just woke up. The photo lab was an hour away, tucked into the corner of a camera supply store run by a Vietnam vet named Gus. He didn't ask many questions. Ellie handed him the canister, her fingers hesitant to let go. Might be expired, she said. Might be nothing. Gus nodded, gave a non-committal grunt, and vanished into the dark room. Max paced outside, while Ellie sat on a bench beside a rack of vintage lenses. Her knees bounced with nervous energy. It took an hour. Gus returned holding a strip of negatives like they were fragile bones. There's something, he said, but you'll want prints. He handed over a manila envelope. Ellie opened it with slow fingers. The first image was grainy, poorly lit. A cruiser parked by a lake. The second closer, same cruiser, door ajar. The third made her stomach knot. A girl. Red coat. The same girl from the locket. Standing alone beside the cruiser, head tilted like someone had just called her name. The fourth photo was different. A man, half turned from the lens. Uniformed. Blurry badge number. But the silhouette, the stance, looked eerily familiar. Ellie turned to Max. That's the badge number from the folder. 93. He nodded, eyes wide. That's this car. She felt the world tilt again. This wasn't coincidence. This was a message preserved in film. Back home, she dug out her father's old duffel bag from the closet. It still smelled of oil and leather. Inside, beneath a folded Glenfield PD windbreaker, she found a spiral notebook. Notes, dates, maps. At the bottom of one page. Case 4420. One never closed. Never told her. Ellie's throat tightened. He had left her a trail, but never spoken a word. Why? She drove to the Glenfield police station, heart thudding. The place looked smaller now, less imposing than it did when she was a child waiting in the back of her dad's cruiser with a juice box. She asked for the case file. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. There is no file. 4421, Ellie insisted. The woman checked twice. No such number in the system. Outside, Max scrolled through a web archive of Glenfield police activity. He found a single memo from late 1996. Internal Review Committee dissolved. All pending evidence reclassified or destroyed. Case 4421 was never archived because it was never meant to exist. Ellie stared at the cruiser parked in her bay that night. Underneath the rot and rust, this car wasn't just forgotten, it was erased. But the past doesn't go quietly. It leaves fingerprints in photos, in metal, in memory. She opened the glove box again and found something she hadn't noticed before. A key taped to the inside wall. Small, brass, labeled Locker A, Sergeant R.G. Her father's initials. It was time to open whatever he'd left behind. The truth had waited long enough. The brass key fit perfectly into the small file locker her father had kept in the attic of the old barn. Ellie hadn't touched it in years, not since the funeral. She remembered thinking back then that he had locked away nothing but rusted bolts and maybe old awards. Now, her hands trembled as she turned the key and opened the door. Inside, there were stacks of faded folders, and at the very back a wooden box. She pulled it out gently and placed it on the workbench. Max stood beside her, saying nothing, just letting the silence wrap around them like dust. The box creaked open. Inside, they found photos, dozens of them. Lillian Vance at a birthday party, Lillian at school, Lillian holding a small black puppy. Some of the pictures were clearly surveillance shots taken from afar, through windows, from a cruiser window. There was also a handwritten letter, addressed to Ellie. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I never meant to drag you into this, but I couldn't let the truth vanish like they wanted. Case 4421 was real. Lillian didn't run away. She was taken. By someone we knew. Someone I trusted. I tried to reopen it. They shut me down. I thought keeping this evidence might help someone one day. Maybe you. Ellie's fingers clenched the page. Her father had lived with this, worked beside the very people who'd buried the truth. And now, she was holding the thread they'd tried so hard to snip. They laid out the evidence on the shop table, like pieces of a broken engine, each one part of a bigger machine. Among the items was a cassette tape labeled simply, Interview. 11/12 96. They borrowed an old tape player from the thrift store, and the voice that crackled out wasn't her father's but someone younger. A girl, crying. He said if I told anyone, I'd disappear too. Ellie stopped the tape. She looked at the cruiser through the garage window. The same car from the photos. The same cruiser her father had refused to sell, donate, or part out. He told her once, "Some machines don't belong to us. They carry stories, even after the keys stop turning. And this one carried screams, secrets, maybe even justice." Max spoke quietly. "So what now?" Ellie whispered. "We find the rest of her story. And then she'd find the man who buried it." The next morning, Ellie drove the cruiser not on errands, not to the junkyard, but back to the place it came from. She pulled it into the parking lot of the Glenfield Police Department. The same concrete slabs, the same faded blue trim. And on the bench out front, she saw him, retired Chief Dempsey. White hair, hunched shoulders, newspaper folded across his knee. She parked beside the bench, the cruiser's engine hiccuping like a tired throat. Dempsey looked up, squinting. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "That old beast still breathes." Ellie approached slowly. "You remember it?" she asked. His eyes didn't leave the vehicle. Every dent, every ghost. She sat beside him. "This car was involved in something. You know it. And so did my dad." Dempsey exhaled through his nose. "Ray should have destroyed it. That's what they told him to do. But he didn't," Ellie said. "No," the chief said. "Because your father had a conscience, and maybe because he had a daughter close to Lillian's age." He turned to her. There was a detective back then. Mallory. Decorated. Charismatic. Dangerous. We had whispers. Complaints. Then Lillian vanished. Mallory was lead on the case. His voice dropped. He buried it. Ellie's hands clenched into fists. "Why didn't anyone stop him?" Dempsey stared at the cruiser. "Because he wore a badge, and sometimes the uniform blinds you." She stood. "I want his file. Whatever's left." Dempsey nodded slowly. "Come back tonight. I'll leave it in the shed out back. Old keys still work." That night, Ellie returned under a broken moon. The shed creaked open, and inside, in a dusty box labeled Archive, she found Mallory's personnel file. Buried deep was a disciplinary report from 1,997 unauthorized traffic stop. Complaint filed. Internal review recommended, dropped due to lack of evidence. The date? 2 days before Lillian disappeared. As Ellie walked back to the cruiser, her father's words echoed in her head. "Justice takes time, but truth waits forever." She ran her hand along the doorframe. The cruiser didn't feel like metal anymore. It felt like testimony. Ellie pulled the cruiser back into Bay 2 under the glow of a dim morning. Max was already there, sleeves rolled up, coffee in hand. "What did you find?" he asked. Ellie dropped the folder on the workbench. "Enough to know Mallory was dirty, and that this cruiser might have carried more than just passengers." They opened up the dashboard, careful not to snap the brittle wires. Something wasn't right. Standard patrol cars had a clean wiring harness for radios and lights. But this one had a hidden switch beneath the steering column, spliced into the power line. Ellie flipped it. Nothing. Then Max pried open a rusted panel behind the glove box, and out tumbled a hard drive, wrapped in plastic. Police issue. Ellie stared at it like it had teeth. They spent the day hunting for someone who could pull data from a 1,996 cruiser dashcam. The closest thing they found was a tech at the community college who loved vintage gear. He hooked it up and ran a program through an emulator. The screen flickered. Then a video appeared grainy, black and white, time-stamped 11/14/96. Mallory's voice came first. Calm. Too calm. "You know what happens if you talk, don't you?" The video showed the inside of the cruiser, the cage, and Lillian, crying quietly. Ellie's heart stopped. Pause it. They could see the badge number. The gear shift. The rearview mirror angled toward the back seat. Mallory's face appeared briefly, just enough for the grain to outline his profile. The video cut out after 47 seconds. But it was enough. It proved the car had been used to transport Lillian. Not as a rescue, as a threat. Ellie sat down hard on the stool. He used this cruiser to kidnap her. Max looked at her. And your dad tried to stop it. That's why he kept everything. Ellie nodded slowly. He knew justice might not come for him, but he wanted the truth to outlive him. She opened a new folder on her laptop, labeled it Project 4421. Inside, she uploaded the video, the photos, the files. If anything happened to her, the story wouldn't die with her. The past would speak, and she would rebuild the cruiser not just to restore what was lost, but to remind everyone what silence can cost. The sun hadn't risen when Ellie pulled her father's jacket over her shoulders and stepped into the bay. The cruiser sat stripped and silent. She ran a hand across the hood, whispering, "All right, old girl, let's do this." She started with the wiring clearing corrosion, rerouting clean lines, documenting every strange modification Mallory had made. The glove box, the rear speakers, even the back seat belts had been altered like he'd prepped the car for control, not transport. Max came in around 9, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You okay?" he asked. Ellie looked up, grease on her cheek. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm ready." They worked through the day, cleaned the cage, polished the chrome, sanded the paint back to bare metal. Underneath the flaking black, they found original blue and white police livery, like a uniform waiting to be worn again. But honestly, this time, later that night, Ellie unlocked her dad's safe. Inside were only two things: a folded newspaper clipping about Lillian's disappearance, and a receipt for a custom paint blend, Crimson Justice, metallic blue W, silver flake. She smiled despite the ache. "He planned to repaint it," she whispered. "Make it something new." They mixed the paint in silence. By midnight, the first coat shimmered under the bay lights. Not black, not forgotten, but bold, honest, seen. Ellie whispered to herself. This time, the story won't get buried. Word spread fast. First, it was Officer Patel, who had trained under Ellie's father. Then a journalist from Glenfield Weekly, curious about why a rusted cruiser was glowing like a sapphire in the middle of a mechanic's shop. Ellie showed them the photos, the file, the tape. She didn't push. She didn't accuse. She showed. The next day, someone left flowers on the cruiser's hood. No note, just lilies. Lillian's namesake. A local teacher brought his students to see it. "This is what history looks like when it refuses to stay buried," he told them. The town started remembering. Ellie set up a board beside the cruiser with a timeline of the case photos, records, her father's notes. Not for spectacle, for truth. She called it the evidence wall. Then came the call. From a woman who claimed to be Lillian's cousin. She had lived 2 states away. Her voice shook. "You're the first person in 30 years who's believed she didn't run away." Ellie invited her to the shop. When she arrived, her hand hovered over the fender like it was sacred. She whispered, "My uncle always said the cruiser was the last place she was seen." Tears welled up. And now, it's the place she's being seen again. That night, Ellie added a brass plate to the dash. It read, Unit 93, dedicated to the truth they tried to bury, and beneath it, Lillian Vance, never forgotten. The cruiser rolled slowly through Glenfield's Main Street parade. Ellie drove. Max rode shotgun. Behind them, the entire town followed on foot, on bikes, in trucks, and classic cars. No one cheered. No balloons. Just silence. Respect. They parked it in front of the courthouse, where a permanent exhibit was being installed, Voices Unburied, the Lillian Vance case. The cruiser would stay on display, not as a symbol of policing, but as a monument to listening, to remembering. Ellie stepped to the mic during the dedication, her hands still stained with primer and polish. "This car was once a cage," she said. "But now, it's a voice. My father believed truth mattered more than silence. Today, we make sure he was right." The crowd stayed quiet for a moment. Then someone clapped. And another. And another. As the sun began to fall behind the courthouse, the cruiser shimmered in blue and silver. Ellie placed the locket on the dashboard and hung the badge number GCPD 93 from the rearview mirror. That night, she stood in her empty shop. The bay light buzzed. The floor smelled of cleaner and oil. She ran her hand across the bare metal table, thinking of her father's voice, of Lillian's lost years, of the silence finally broken. She didn't feel like a girl fixing broken things anymore. She felt like a mechanic of memory, a restorer of justice. She turned off the lights one by one, but this time, something stayed lit inside her.